Hi, I'm Liz Tobey, and this is April 30th, 2016. It's Maryland Day, and I'm going to talk about an experience that I had when I was a doctoral student at the University of Maryland in the art history department. I experienced a tornado that came through College Park on September 24th, 2001. Now, I believe it was a Monday, and ordinarily I wouldn't have been on campus on that day, but I happened to be on campus that day because I was having a special review session for my art history students. And the reason why we were having the review session is that the September 11th attacks had happened earlier that month, and we had missed several days of school. And I wanted the students to be prepared for an upcoming test, so I scheduled this extra review session for them. And it had been a really humid day, unusually humid and hot for late September. After I finished the review session, I went out to my car, which was parked in Lot 1 behind the campus. And I got into my car and I turned onto Campus Drive and then took a right-hand turn onto University Boulevard, or 193, which is the road that parallels the back side of campus. And as I was going around the corner, I saw this flash of blue light, very intense, and then a clap of thunder, and I knew that we were having some really violent weather, violent thunderstorm, I thought. And as I was in the right-hand lane heading east on University Boulevard, when all of a sudden I noticed that the traffic was slowing to a stop, and I was basically stopped in traffic, and I noticed that the wind was starting to pick up, and it was starting to get darker, and the wind was going faster and faster, and all of a sudden I could feel the pressure drop. And I was startled because the windows of my car just suddenly imploded, and glass just showered everywhere in my lap and everything. And I looked over to the car next to me, and the woman in the car next to me had a jacket that was on her passenger seat, and the wind pulled the jacket out of the car, and it got held up on my side mirror. And I remember I didn't see a funnel cloud, but I noticed that the wind was getting more and more intense, and I was looking towards the side of the road, and I noticed that the wind was picking up these huge mature trees and ripping them out by their roots and tossing them several stories into the air. And I also saw cars being picked up and thrown up into the air, and it was just terrifying. And I don't know why I didn't, bow my head down and cover myself to try to protect myself, but I guess I was in shock. And I guess, I stayed straight up in my seat and watched as the tornado came through parallel to the road coming towards me. And I think probably in some way I felt that if I could keep my eyes on the tornado, that I could somehow keep it away from me. And right next to where my car was stopped was the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center, which they had just completed building at that time. And there was also a temporary building set up for the Fire and Rescue Institute right next to the Clarice Smith Center. And I remember I saw the tornado come through, and it just demolished that temporary building. I saw computers suddenly exposed, papers flying all over the place, but very quickly it was gone. And I remember I pulled my car to the side of the road, stopped, got out, and I started looking around the area just to the right of University Boulevard where there was sort of a ditch, and I noticed that there were a lot of cars that were overturned. I started walking around to see whether there were anybody in those cars. I didn't find anybody. And then somebody came out from the Clarice Smith Center and started yelling to people who were coming out of the cars and saying, get in the building. There may be another tornado coming, because I guess apparently tornadoes sometimes travel in pairs. So we went into the building, we went down to the basement. It was only then that I realized that I had blood on my head from a small cut, but I'd been cut by the flying glass, but that was the only injury that I had. And after staying in the basement for a while, they brought us up to the Black Box Theater, which was in the interior of the building and thus didn't have any windows, so it was a safe place to wait. And I noticed that there were all these people in this really fancy attire within that room. And I found out that there had been a reception going on to celebrate the opening of the Clarice Smith Performing Arts Center when the tornado hit, and they had ushered everybody into the Black Box Theater. So I actually got to talk with Mrs. Moat, who was the wife of President Moat, the university president at the time. And I also ran into a theater professor who I'd taken a screenwriting course with a year before. But anyway, there was some wine from the reception, so a couple people, including myself, had a glass of wine. But we weren't allowed to leave the building for about 2.5 hours. And I was getting concerned because my car was right in the middle of the debris field, and I was concerned that it was going to block emergency vehicles and cause problems. So I finally spoke to one of the emergency people, and told them where my car was, and they took me out in a little golf cart to my car. And because the road of University Boulevard eastward was impassable, I had to drive down across the grass median strip and head westward on University Boulevard and take a long route home with my windows smashed and rain coming into my car. But I only found out later that there were 2 girls, University of Maryland undergrads, who were sisters, who were leaving campus around the same time that I was stuck in traffic on University Boulevard. They had been trying to exit from the back part of campus onto University Boulevard, and unfortunately their car went straight into the path of the tornado. And from what I heard, the tornado picked up their car and lifted it above a 8-story dormitory, and it smashed down on the other side, and they were instantly killed. I think it was Denton Hall that the car went over, but it was just tragic. And I also heard that they had just been visiting their father, who worked in the Fire and Rescue Institute building that I had seen demolished next to University Boulevard. So when I think about that day, I still think about those 2 girls and how their lives were lost so quickly. And I was incredibly grateful to have survived that the tornado passing through with just a small cut on my forehead. I still have scratches on the steering wheel of my car where the flying glass cut into the steering wheel, and occasionally I still find little bits of glass in my trunk and in different parts of my car. But it was a very difficult time because, we had just been through the 9/11 attacks in New York and Washington, which really hit close to home. And then on September 14th, 2001, my grandmother up in Massachusetts, fortunately I was able to get up there before she passed away, but she passed away from cancer on September 14th. And when I think about my close call with the tornado, I think that I keep on thinking that my grandmother must have been looking out for me to be able to get through that experience with just a scratch. But it's definitely something that I'll never forget. And for years afterwards, whenever I was driving and there was a bad thunderstorm, I would have to pull off to the side of the road and sit for a while until the storm passed, because I was so terrified that there would be another tornado. It really makes you respect the power of nature to see something like that. I guess I'm glad in a way that I experienced it, but it's something I hope I never have to experience again. Thank you.